Welcome everybody, and very good morning to all of you. Good to have you here on site today, and also, of course, people online. My name is Jessica, and I'll be the host of this morning mixer. Also, some of my colleagues here on site today, we have Bara in the back taking care of our production. Then we have Hanna there, social media. Then Josephine here running the hub. And then we have Tia also online, hyping in the chat box if there's anything. It's really good to see you all. I was talking with some of you prior to getting here on the stage that it's really good to see people in real. And I guess that's like something we've been hearing a lot, people craving for these encounters and bringing people together. That's what was, of course, also Mario 01 and our community is all about. So I'm really excited to see you all here today. And this is actually the first community breakfast we're hosting on site. It's been a year from the last time, so good to have you all here. These morning mixers and community breakfast events are all about bringing community together and start the mornings in the best way possible. Together over breakfast and, of course, learn about new topics, gain new insights, and talk with people from the community. Today's session is Unlocking the Green Behind the Cloud, and we have some experts here who are going to take the stage and talk about their approach to sustainability. Also, we're going to be covering why we should be talking about green cloud, and also hear about a startup case. After that, we're going to have a Q&A session. And about the Q&A part, we're using Slido today, so feel free to read the QR code or just log in with the password. And you can ask any question you like. If you don't have a question, feel free to still check it out because you can upvote questions there, and then I can pick them in the end. And if there's anything else, feel free also, of course, to tweet about the event and tagging Mario 01 and our speakers as well. But I think without any further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker here on stage, Juha Takala from Accenture, who's going to share more about Accenture's approach to sustainability in green cloud. Welcome.
Thanks. So I hope the mic is working okay. So really excited to be here talking to you about the super important topic that we have today. When listening to the introduction speech, I was thinking this is actually the first this kind of live event I'm participating and speaking for, let's say, 2 years, if we don't include the last weekend's wedding that I was a best man for the fiancée. So this is the first live audience for me in 2 years. But without further ado, some words about myself. So my name is Juha Takala. I've been working for Accenture in total roughly 9 years in two parts. So I started already in 2007 and then jumped into the, let's say, smaller scale of company in 2015 and spent 6 years there working closely with the cloud migration and cloud related matters. And now joining back to Accenture, and there I'm part of the team that's responsible for doing, let's say, the solutioning for cloud transitions and making, let's say, the business cases and the profits more visible for the customers that utilize cloud in their let's say, everyday operations. But let's move on. For the agenda for my part today, we'll address 3 questions that I would like you to ask yourselves. So why are we actually talking this today? Why is this topic important? Then the second part is about what's it's for me. So meaning then, especially for the startup community, why is this topic important? So I know I'm from a, let's say, enterprise scale company, Accenture, but still when preparing for the presentation today, it's quite easy to find the links between the smaller companies and also the larger enterprises, because the topic that we are discussing today concerns every one of us, no matter what is the size of the company or a community that you are representing. And then the third part is about how are the other companies actually doing this. So what are the, let's say, characteristics of the companies that are successfully utilizing the sustainability theme in their business operations. All right, the first part is about why we're talking this today. So it can be said that the topic has been in the discussion for quite many years, but actually in 2015, when the Paris Climate Agreement was made, it addresses quite heavily the effects of the global warming that is happening. So we can see by every week and every day the effects that the global warming is having and the impact that this has on the world around us. And based on the 2015 climate agreement, the governments have made quite heavy actions and quite important plans that address the ways how they can then push the businesses that are operating in those countries to make those targets kind of possible. And here the idea is that by 2050 the commitment is to make the carbon footprint to net zero, meaning that now we have roughly 30 years or less than 30 years to make this happen. And this is now the, let's say, the big picture that comes from the sustainable goals that the United Nations have set, and the Paris Agreement then addresses on those. And part of my presentation today will speak about these goals. So we made a joint strategy paper with the UN. So Accenture and UN made the study on sustainability, and it interviewed CEOs representing different sizes of companies, how they see those actions and how they see the linkage between the sustainable goals to their actual business. So from the UN sustainable goals, there are quite many that actually are very tightly related to the topics that we are discussing today. For example, the renewable energy, the way the communities and cities are sustainable, the way that we are consuming services and products as consumers. And in the study, it's pretty obvious and pretty clear that no matter what the size of a company, the CEOs see that the sustainability is a topic that is something that needs to be addressed now, or at least in the next 5 years. So it's really difficult nowadays to find a company that says that, okay, this is not an important topic for us, because it affects the businesses, it affects the way they are able to get new people on board, meaning that if you want to be a successful company, you have to have the best people to work for. And the people who are kind of selecting their employer are also considering how is the company addressing the topic. So the study is pretty clear, and it's not kind of a surprise. Some examples how the topic of sustainability can be kind of addressed and is addressed in an area of technology that we are representing. So one example is the digital twin technology. So it's the concept of a digital twin is actually kind of produce a digital or virtual kind of image of a physical thing. Let's say it can be a factory, it can be a product. It's something that's physical, and now you can model it in a digital way. And this actually opens up quite many things that you can use to kind of make your carbon footprint smaller. Meaning that, for example, if you have a factory that's been modeled in a digital way, you can easily test with the digital model that, okay, how would this kind of change affect our operations? Or, for example, if you have a product that has been modeled in a digital way, then you can, for example, use that digital model to figure out that, okay, when the life cycle of that product is ending, how can we further utilize all the parts? Because now if you have two products modeled in a digital way, you don't need to actually physically try to think that, okay, how these could be used, for example, spare parts for the other product, but instead you can run that kind of through an inventory of all the products that you have modeled, and you can get, let's say, there are tens of thousands of products, and you can put the spare parts in those. So it's a really kind of a key enabler for the kind of reusing the parts. Then another example is about how the buildings can be connected to utilize, let's say, a greener energy. This is with the IoT, meaning connecting buildings to an Internet of Things and then getting information about for example, the climate inside the building. You can control the temperature and so on. So it's a kind of way to make the building intelligent, and this is of course part of the cloud and part of the sustainability theme. Then the third one of the examples is about the recycling with robotics using AI. So meaning that in addition to the recycling of selecting that, okay, I'll put my papers in this bin and I put the plastic in this bin, when those let's say waste flows go to the facility that processes those, it contains robots that then can utilize, for example, the machine vision to kind of pick up let's say, those things that don't belong to that waste stream and so on. So this is a really big industry that's already being starting up, and there are quite many examples of companies doing this already. So the topic is important from the ecosystem perspective, but also from the business value that it can create. So all the business communities that are in the area. But now the question from a startup point of view: so why is this topic important? So as said, this is something that has been rising to the people's top concerns, and this is, let's say, from 3 points of view: consumer, then the employer, and then the investor point of view. So let's say for consumers that we all are, it's one of the 4 top priorities for a consumer to consider which service or which product to select. So if there's a company or a product that's easily kind of identified as more sustainable than the alternative, then quite many of us already make the selection to select the more sustainable products. And the COVID pandemic has actually kind of emphasized this even more. So it has been quite a, let's say, a kind of a catalyst to push the importance of the sustainability even more. Then the second point of view is the employees. So as said, when selecting a company you would like to work for, quite many already think that or consider how is the company then addressing the sustainability topic. And as the competition is quite fierce, it's in Finland, it's fierce in Europe, and also in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So almost every company would like to get the best people to work for them. And when seeking for the best people, it's really important that you don't kind of limit the opportunities by kind of ranging that some part of the people kind of out of scope. And then, especially for the startup community, the investor kind of point of view is really important. So it's not by chance that the investors are looking for this topic quite intensively. So, and that's because when kind of building a portfolio of investments, nowadays the investors already have the kind of opportunity to select that kind of companies that are sustainable and address the topic in such way that also the investors can then kind of reach their goals of sustainability angle in the building the portfolios. And the investors are quite loud when they are speaking about this. So this is not something that's in their kind of in a strategy paper or somewhere kind of in the last slide of a presentation, but it's exactly it is actually something that's a key topic in the earning calls that they are making. So roughly half of the earning calls of the globally biggest companies, the G2000 means the 2000 biggest companies in the world, half of those investor calls, earnings calls are already addressing the topic, and the amount is rising. So it's really important. And this is not by accident, because the sustainability is something that actually can be is creating value. And the CEOs and the investors see this. So it brings up new business opportunities through brand increase, revenue growth, risk mitigation, or cost reduction. So almost, and this is from the same study, so almost every CEO sees that there are potential to make even kind of better and more sustainable business by actually addressing the sustainability. So it's not something that just, okay, if we are good in doing things in a sustainable way, that would kind of save the world. That's just one part of it. But actually by acting sustainability, we are actually creating business and even more kind of business value out of that. So it's not kind of that kind of scale that goes up and down, but instead it's a win-win game for us and the companies. And from the same study, the consumers and employees are actually the key drivers to make this happen. So this was a questionnaire that people answered that, okay, what are the top 3 kind of groups of people that would drive the sustainable topic in business? And consumers and employees came almost in half of the answers. Then moving to the third part of the presentation is actually how our company is doing this, and this section acts as a transition to the next speaker's topic that will then dive even more deeper in the topic. So when thinking about cloud and the CO2 footprint, how does that consist of? So this is a comparison of a, let's say, old school on-premise enterprise IT solution. So meaning there's some servers in a hall, and how does that the footprint comprise of? So most of the footprint is from the compute and the power and cooling. And when moving to public cloud, that for example AWS represents, you get let's say the benefits of the scale of the operation. So larger the scale, the more kind of efficient you can make it for a single user. And when moving to the public cloud, the CO2 emissions can be reduced quite heavily. So just a comparison, by taking 22 million cars off the road, that's a pretty difficult thing to do. But instead, doing migrations to public cloud, that's not that difficult thing to do. So this is an option that is not something that's impossible. It's actually something that we are doing every day, and it's the kind of speed is increasing all the time. And then about the characteristics of the companies that are doing this successfully. So we call those continuum competitors, and what is kind of typical for them is the speed of innovation, their capability to scale globally, and they utilize the rapidly changing business models. Meaning that if you look the cloud the way it was looked 10 years ago, it was only about servers and only about, let's say, network connections and how could you kind of utilize the connectivity that's in the internet or in the public cloud. But nowadays it's more of a how do you utilize the cloud in the core of your business model. So you actually build your business model on kind of around the cloud. So it's not just something that you can, let's say, easily provision some servers or something that you need to run your application, but instead it's in your business. So without the cloud, it's kind of impossible for you to do the business. That's the kind of linkage there. And as said, it's not just a kind of, the cloud is not a destination. It's a kind of a continuum that you use to kind of changed your business model when the world around you changes. So with the kind of old school way, it's quite difficult to kind of respond to the changes in the world around us. Let's say the pandemic that's been going on, and for example the restaurants who are used to kind of serve their kind of customers inside the restaurant, and suddenly it totally changed. Of course, there had been, let's say, home deliveries and such, but it was not the kind of the key of the business model. But suddenly, it just in a matter of days or weeks, it all changed. And how could the companies respond to that? It was part of the kind of let's say those who had that kind of agility in their business model were able to do it and got the advantage of the situation. And then three things to consider when kind of addressing the topic in a company in a, let's say, systematic way. So if you want to become a company, or if you want your company to become something that has the net zero effect, you have to address it. So first you have to commit to a target. So you have to have a target to get kind of to know where you're heading to. And then you have to embed the carbon intelligence to manage your budget. So the same way you're managing your financial budget, you have to be managing and analyzing your carbon budget. So you know where you're going and you know where you are, and you can then plan accordingly. And the third one is that you can't do this by yourself. You have to leverage your influence to mobilize your industry and value chain. So all the suppliers, all the other companies that you are working with, you have to work with them and influence them. And this is, if you are representing a large company, then of course you can make kind of this kind of selections to your supply chain and such. But when you are, let's say, a smaller company, you have to know that the larger companies are actually addressing this. So if you don't address the sustainability topic, it might be that you run out of business because the larger companies that you would sell to won't start playing with you because you are not compliant to their kind of strategy and their values and vision. And I'll end my presentation, I guess 20 minutes have passed, with the words from Barbara Martin Coppola. She's the digital officer from IKEA. So it's not just about kind of making things sustainable. It's that the cloud is actually a key enabler to the business. So without the cloud and only with the cloud, you're able to reach your goals and embed all the data and analytics into your kind of core business. And it's IKEA is a really big company, and they are doing it in a such way that changes quite many people's lives around the world. So really interested also to see how this is visible in the coming years. But with that, I'll end my presentation, and if you want more information, I can provide the links for the study. It's time to say thank you, and next speaker.
Thank you, Juha. Thank you so much. And a slight reminder also about the Slido. So we have the Q&A session coming up after our next speaker. I already saw there were some really good questions in the pipeline, so feel free to add those and we'll take them afterwards. Here's still, the instructions on how to present your questions in the Slido. And even though you would not have a question, just go in there and check the questions out, and you can upvote really good questions, and then we'll take them afterwards. But hey, moving on then for our next speaker. We have Ravin here joining us on stage, who's going to also be talking about AWS approach to green cloud and sustainability, and also an interesting startup case that we'll hear more about. The stage is yours. Welcome.
Absolutely, Jessica. Thanks a lot. Great. So, good morning, everybody. When I was listening to Juha's speech, I hadn't seen his presentation before. And when I was looking at the presentation, I was smiling in the background because basically we have the same message, just in a different way. And before I start, firstly, I want to say thank you to everybody for taking time out in your day to actually come and listen to this. It's amazing to see how many people are actually taking sustainability seriously. So good to see all of you here. So with that, my name is Ravin Mathura. I'm a solution architect for sustainability at AWS in the Nordics. I've been at AWS now for 1 year, and prior to AWS I worked in an enterprise company that was a partner for AWS Solutions. I'm going to answer Juha's question for you about what's in it for me. As a parent of 3 kids, sustainability is high on my agenda at a personal and social level. And when I ask myself, where can I make the difference? I look at my background of being in IT for 25 years, and that's the most easiest place to start. So that's why I'm doing sustainability in the Nordics in AWS. Okay? So today, what we're going to cover is understanding AWS sustainability goals, AWS's approach to sustainability, and basically we're going to talk about a startup case. So we're talking about sustainability, but how do we actually do it, right? So, raise of hands, who heard of the climate pledge before? Great, wow. And from this morning's talk, you would have heard about the Paris Agreement, right? And that's basically reach net zero carbon by 2050. And in 2019, Amazon and a company called Global Optimism announced the climate pledge. What does that mean? That means that we are trying to achieve the same target by the year 2040, 10 years earlier. Right? So that's quite a big commitment from the AWS and the Amazon perspective, along with climate pledge. When we look at the amount of companies that have actually signed up today, we have 200 companies that have signed up, 8 in the Nordics. So people are quite serious about this, right? In Amazon, we have an internal target to be 100% renewable energy by 2025, 4 years from now. So if you think about that, it's not a lot of time, but a lot to do, right? And AWS and Amazon have set aside a $2 billion climate pledge fund for small companies and startups that basically have innovative ideas about how to actually reach sustainability goals and help the future. Okay. When you look at the picture at the right, you can consider that to be Amazon. And as you can see, Amazon is quite a big organization in its size, made up of separate companies, AWS being one. And as Juha said, when you look at sustainability, you don't only look at what you do, but what also others do and how they affect your business and how you depend on them. So when we look at sustainability, we look at sustainability as a whole across the whole Amazon business, and AWS being one part of it. So when we look at who we buy from, what suppliers we choose, how we deliver to the end customer, how we choose where we deliver from, this is all about sustainability, and carbon footprint has a piece to play in all of this. So it's at such a big scale that it's this serious. It's not only about carbon footprint and how can we reduce carbon footprint, but how can we look at across the whole chain to make sure that everybody in the chain is responsible for sustainability. And back to Juha's point, that if you choose to become sustainable for the future, your business opportunities open up, and also your end customers see the value in using you as a supplier. Okay? So basically it comes down to social responsibility and working together. In AWS and in Amazon, basically what we are doing is going back to the target of 2025, be 100% on renewable energy. Currently, Amazon is the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. And basically, as I explained, we are trying to get to 100% renewable energy by 2025. As such, we have 232 global renewable energy projects, 85 utility scale and wind projects currently ongoing, one that's about to kick off on the north of Finland, just under Oulu. So we're going to kick off a wind farm that we are basically sponsoring and developing with the local team. We have 147 on-site solar systems providing renewable energy. And we have 10 gigawatts of total renewable capacity that we can generate as of today because of this. What does 10 gigawatts mean? Anybody remember those 60-watt light bulbs? We can power 166 million of those light bulbs as of today. So I don't know what that says for you, but that's pretty impressive, right? And it's only getting better. So how does AWS look at sustainability? We look at it as a shared responsibility model. Basically, AWS will take care of the responsibility in the cloud, off the cloud, and the customer is responsible for sustainability in the cloud. So what does that mean? So AWS will take care of looking at the sustainability of the global infrastructure, our data centers, our servers, our water, waste, even down to the building materials that we are using to build the data centers. So we are looking into what type of concrete actually makes up the data center, and is it actually sustainable? So we are actually focusing at that level. What does this mean for you? This means that basically as we reach our sustainability goals of being net zero by 2040, you also reach it. So as we get better at reducing our carbon footprint, so do you by using the services. And for the customer's responsibility, how you actually use the cloud is how you will achieve your sustainability goals. So for example, when you look at data storage, do you need to keep data for 7 years or for 10 years? Do you need to actually use servers that are not running? Can you scale them down and use them only when you need them? Can you look at your code and actually see where it makes sense to efficientize your code? And also when you choose software, what type of software do you choose? What decisions do you make on software? As you will come across the software world, you will understand that different types of software will lead to different types of efficiencies. But again, it's a decision that you consciously make. Okay? So in 2019, AWS commissioned a report from a company called 451 Research, and the research was about how efficient is the carbon utilization from AWS when you compare it to a US enterprise data center. And what the report found was basically running the same workload on AWS was 3.6 times more efficient than running it in a data center. Right? Basically, AWS performs the same task 88% lower than any other data center in the US when it comes to an enterprise data center. And the metrics come from the fact that 61% of the efficiency comes from the fact of utilization. So in AWS, the servers are utilized more than you would find in a typical data center. 17% comes from renewable energy, and 11% comes from the fact that you can choose your code and your utilization. Okay? So now we jump to a use case. Tibber. This is a startup company in the Nordics, basically providing electricity applications to its customers. And what they wanted to do was be digital. So they wanted to use digital infrastructure to basically reach out to their customers and provide a service for their customers where their customers had the choice to consume less electricity at the times they wanted and basically save money. And how do they do this? What Tibber did was they looked at the architecture, they looked at how they were actually going to implement this and what data they needed. And they needed data from basically all the devices that are IoT. So what Tibber did was they used AWS as a platform to actually ingest the data from all the devices. And as Tibber started, they noticed that the IoT devices started doubling every month, which means in May 2021, they had 710 billion messages coming to AWS. Now think about that. 710 billion messages from all the IoT devices coming. That's a huge responsibility because you are working with your customers to make sure that you can actually show the data in real time and allow the customers to make decisions on that. To implement this infrastructure in a data center on your own, firstly will require a huge upfront investment and also a lot of development. With AWS, they could use the native services and basically implement it for the customers on demand. The customers have an app where they basically can choose at what time they use the electricity, at what currency they use the electricity, and when. For example, if a customer wants to charge their electric car and it's in the evening, they have all the appliances on, do you really need to charge the electric car when it's most expensive? You can, for example, say, I need the car charged by 8 o'clock, set it at a certain price, and let the app do the charging. And that's working sustainably. And how did Tibber achieve this? They use services, and you will see this in the next slide. They use services from AWS, for example, called IoT Core. They use Lambda. They use Amazon RDS. Now, I know these are technical terms and these are AWS services, but in the next slide, I will go through them. So, basically, when you look at how to be sustainable in the cloud, right, you look at how you actually architect your workload in the cloud. So, for example, using serverless APIs. What does a serverless API mean? It means that you actually do not have a server running the workload. It's a managed service where you do not deploy a server. It's in AWS and it's provisioned for you. You use it as you need it. Asynchronous calls. What does that mean? That means use the service when you need it. Don't provision a server and wait for something to happen. Use event-driven architecture. So use the service when you need it, and you only pay for what you use. Horizontal scaling. So when you're basically scale to meet your workload, if you know your customers are going to be online between 7 and 9, you scale out for the IT infrastructure to meet that demand. And from 9 to 6, when the customers are sleeping, do you need that much of compute power? No, you don't. So you scale down. Basically, you reduce your carbon footprint, you reduce your cost, and you're acting sustainably. Okay? Then, patterns for sustainability. At AWS, we look at the 5 different patterns, user patterns. Basically, this is coming down to how are your users using your service? Are you going to have a Black Friday where you need demand? On weekends, is anybody using your service? Software patterns, choosing your code. Making the right choice of code for your purpose is extremely important because it basically uses less CPU cycles. Hardware patterns. We talk about auto-scaling and basically scaling out and scaling in. So use the service when you need it. Data patterns. Look at your data and see for how long you need it, when you need it, and what can you do with the data. And dev and test patterns. Most companies will keep dev and test environments running on the weekend or when people don't use it. Do you actually need to? So ask yourself these questions. Can I scale down my test and dev and only use it when I need it? Okay. So when we look at AWS and we look at our customers, we look at these certain goals for optimization. So maximize utilization. So if you have a service running, maximize the utilization of it because it will run more efficiently. So we have in the research that we conducted, we have a metric that shows a server running at 70% utilization is more energy efficient than a server running at 10% CPU utilization. Okay. Again, when you look at software design, use the CPU cycles. Eliminate idle resources. So from working in IT for the last 20 years and working in a data center, usually there are servers running that nobody knows about and they're powered on. Data processing. Process your data when you need it and basically based on events. And data storage. Store your data how you need it, when you need it, and for as long as you need it. Okay? And the opportunity of the sustainability through the AWS cloud. So basically, we have a free data sets available to customers on AWS. It's called the Open Data Program, of which sustainability is part of. And what does this mean? This means if you want to use data sets to actually drive your decisions and your analytics, the data sets are there and available. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, create the data sets, create your architecture. You just basically use what's available. And it's free at this point, so it helps with the customers where they just pull the data sets, use it for their analytics, and get the result. And that basically helps the customer reduce on TCO footprint and carbon footprint, and also helps with the sustainability goals. Okay. And that was it for today. So I know quite a technical presentation. If you have any questions about how to do it in the cloud, I'm available after the presentation. But again, thanks a million for taking the time out today to listen to this, and happy to take any technical questions after the session. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Ravin, and feel free to stay on the stage and take a seat here in the middle, and Juha also, please join us back. Time for the Q&A session, and yeah, there's been some really good questions coming in so far, so thank you all for asking those. Just still also a glass of water if you're thirsty after your great presentations. Let's see. All right. A couple of questions. I maybe want to start with asking Juha, what would you say are some of the crucial steps for an early stage startup that wants to start migrating towards a green cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, that can be, let's say, addressed in a different angles. So first one is, of course, you have to understand the kind of ecosystem you're part of. So let's say the supply chain, your customers and such, that you can identify what are the key topics and key interests of the other companies and other kind of stakeholders that you're working with. So that's kind of from the business perspective. Then from actually migrating to the green cloud, and then you should utilize, for example, the ways that Ravin was telling about. So how to build from start your business and your operations in a such way that those are sustainable. So ideally, you don't have to migrate anything since you're already built in a sustainable way. But if you kind of realize that, okay, I'm not actually sustainable, then the migration journey is something that you can plan and then utilize the services that, for example, AWS provides.
Yes, and I was thinking, like, because you also, Ravin, are meeting a lot of startup teams, etc., and any company, obviously, from day zero should be green. But what's kind of like the status for startups teams that come and talk to you in terms of their green cloud operations? Are they there yet? Do they start from like day one, or what kind of like is the status usually for the startup teams you talk to?
So for the startup teams we talk to, what we see is that the startup teams are usually born in the cloud, which helps the carbon footprint and the sustainability goals. And it's kind of nice to work with the startups because we always, in AWS, we always work from the customer backwards. So we always ask the customer and the startups, what use case are you trying to solve, or what problem are you trying to solve? And once we have that picture, then we start to work on how technology and IT will actually support that vision and that future.
Nice, thank you. Then a question here from Slido, and I'm going to direct this to Juha. Can you give some examples on how the topic of today can be linked to the 17 UN SDGs in a practical way?
Yeah, I guess the one good example is, for example, the connected buildings and the usage of let's say green energy on powering those. So it comes straight from one of the UN goals is that how can you kind of the energy that you need, how can that be used in a most sustainable way? Then maybe another example is about how us as consumers are consuming the services in a sustainable way, and how are those services built in a sustainable way. Those might be one of or two examples of the kind of linkage to the goals. And there are, of course, many others, but let's say linking today's kind of presentations, those are maybe the most obvious to kind of grasp and look for more information.
Excellent points there. Maybe, and feel free also to, of course, comment each other's answers, but for an early stage startup team, what are kind of like the things one could focus on when they would like to optimize their cloud costs? Any comments on that, Ravi?
Yeah, firstly start from event-driven architectures. So basically look at, instead of deploying a server and IT infrastructure, look to see how you can just do it without servers. So the technology is there, the building blocks, as we call them in AWS, are there, the services are there. Look at your architecture and basically look to see how you can use the pieces and the services that are provided by AWS to help you build that IT infrastructure and technology to support your customers. And yeah, it's you really need to dive deep. It's easier to install a server and install an application on it, and it gets you up and running faster. But at the end of the day, if you want to really reduce your costs, use the service when you need it. So that would be my tip.
Yeah, and I'll comment to that. I think it's easier to build services on top of AWS in a sustainable way than it's to build them on non-sustainable way, since most of the new services are, let's say, serverless and on demand, scaled by your needs. So you actually have to work to kind of find the ways to build something that's really not that sustainable. So it's not something that's made difficult, it's actually pretty easy. And this is a huge difference of today compared to the, let's say, 10 years ago, when these kind of services were not available. But still you have to kind of take it into consideration when you're designing your architecture and you're designing your service. You have to think about the sustainability. It's not something that just actually happens or doesn't happen, but when you take that into consideration from the start, then it's easier to kind of also take that into consideration when doing the design for your application and your kind of architecture. So it's pretty easy, but still you have to consider it, I would say.
Good points there. And I was also thinking, based on your both presentations earlier today, it's like when we talk about sustainability, etc. Obviously, it's like concerning like what companies are doing, the employees and like talents who are interested to join companies are also like really keen on kind of like hearing what the companies are doing in order to be more sustainable. Juha mentioned investors are really looking into this as well, and also for small companies who want to sell to larger companies, like really having sustainability there in the core is like key here. And then in the Tibber case, because I saw in the slides that you mentioned also that you kind of like have these data insight points that Tibber could kind of like provide to their customers. And obviously like what we can report to customers and report like in our external communications is obviously something people really want to hear. They want to see numbers, they want to see insights. So what are some of these like KPIs or reporting metrics that any startup, and now talking about like early stage going to kind of like scale up stage, what are some of those numbers that the companies could look into, and what are also the numbers customers are interesting to see when we talk about sustainability and the kind of like tech side of it? A broad question maybe.
Yeah, go on, Juha.
Yeah, I can take the easy one is of course the total carbon footprint is maybe the, let's say, a key figure to kind of start with. And the difficulty with that is that it's not actually quite easy to kind of find out. So, and it has been also in the public discussion that what is the actual footprint of a company, of a certain product. Of course, for some products, let's say it's easier to find out what is the carbon footprint of raw materials and processing and such. And of course, let's say AWS and other providers are also providing the information of their service platforms, but then it's not, because let's say for a service, it's not just about the application and the physical products. It's the entire supply chain and all the things that are needed to make the product and service kind of live. So it's pretty difficult to find it out, but still it's the kind of it's easy to understand the total footprints. It's easy to compare, but there are these kind of, let's say, limitations behind it. But that would be let's say, the first one that people are interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. What we hear from our customers is what's our carbon footprint. And when we sit down with the customers and we actually ask them, so why do you actually want to know what your carbon footprint is? And everybody says, well, we want to be sustainable. But then as we dig into the conversation, we start to understand what the customer's sustainability goals are. Like, for example, Juha mentioned the supply chain, basically how you're providing services to your customers. And in trying to discover the actual reason for being sustainable, you start to discover those KPIs for the customers. And it all comes down to basically carbon footprint, it comes down to customers' trust, it comes down to how often are you using the IT services. And cost plays a very big part of the conversation because customers want to be sustainable and have the lowest cost possible.
Nice. And also tapping into the last question and about the carbon footprint, there's one good question here about how the company can estimate the carbon footprint difference when migrating to green cloud. Any reference for numbers, templates, examples is appreciated.
Well, maybe you have something. I can just kind of. I don't have a template for that, but I know that, for example, if you're considering different kind of, let's say, solutions that you, let's say, you need a CRM system to kind of understand your customers. Then there are multiple options in the market already that you can select which of the, let's say, software you would like to pick. And some of those already provide this kind of sustainability or carbon footprint kind of dashboard. So you can easily see that, okay, this is the actual, if I'm starting to use this solution, this is the carbon footprint that I'm going to with my kind of use case. So you can then understand that, okay, this is the option. Well, if you have some system already in use and you don't know the carbon footprint of that, then it's of course difficult to compare. But if you have two options that you can compare, quite many, or at least some already provide that kind of dashboards and calculators to kind of match your business case. So it's not just kind of generic that, okay, we are 50% green or something, but instead you can put in your numbers and then make the selection based on those. But I'm not sure whether AWS has something around that topic already.
AWS has something coming. So, but basically coming back to the question is, my first thought would be is why, if you look at startups and if you think about moving to the cloud, if you have an on-prem footprint, basically the way you can actually look at your carbon footprint is, like Juha said, there's many tools out there that actually look at the components of your infrastructure. They look down at the hardware, they look down at the materials that are made. So companies have been doing this research for quite a long time and they have quite a huge database. They will analyze your environment and give you a carbon footprint. But like Juha said, it's extremely difficult to actually measure this because there are so many inputs. So the number that you get is the number that you basically put the effort into. And then when you're moving to cloud, it's how you architect it. All our reports are available about all our services, and when you actually move to cloud, you will get a carbon footprint calculator that you can use, and it will be basically available for you as a customer.
Nice. Thank you so much, and I think we're starting to round up here. I want to give a big kudos to you for coming here today and talking about Green Cloud. First time we'll be tapping into the topic here at Maria 01, so a lot of learnings and insights. So thank you for coming, and you're still going to be staying here, so if any members here on site want to come and ask more questions from Ravin and Juha, they'll be here. But otherwise, I'm wishing you everybody a really good day. Thank you all for coming. Thank you people online. Thank you for asking good questions. And I hope to see you very soon at our next event. Have a good day.